Good afternoon, all, and welcome to the Q3 LIRC member meeting. On behalf of myself and Alexis, the co-chairs of the steering committee, we're very happy to have you all join us today for a very informative and exciting presentation. I would like to remind everyone that we are bound by the rules of antitrust. So if you take a quick look, and as we go forward, should there be any issue, we will jump in. At this time, I would like to introduce Matthew, who's going to give us an update on LIRC membership. Matthew is also part of the steering committee. Matthew?
Thank you, Nancy. So I would like to first of all give a very warm welcome to everybody joining online. That's the first point. And also after that, to welcome the new members. So let's go through the list. You can see it there. So BR+A, cosine lighting, contact lighting, ERP power, LLC, Interlux, LED Flex, LEDs C4, Lucy, Luxbox, and StarTech lighting. So really a very, very warm welcome to you all. I've been involved with the LIRC now, particularly in Europe, but also internationally now for a number of years. And I can assure you that you're all joining a great organization, and I really encourage you, personal word, I really encourage you to get actively involved, and the more actively involved you get, simply the more value you will get out of it. So from myself, warm welcome, and also on behalf of the whole IALD and LIRC organization, very, very warm welcome to you all. So I hand over back to Nancy.
Thank you, Matthew. As we look at so many of the folks who have joined us in our quarterly virtual meetings, we see that so many folks are not current members. And to spend a moment to what Matthew was speaking of, as someone who's been involved in LIRC since its inception, it has been a phenomenal relationship, and I've really enjoyed it. It's very important that everyone understand when your organization joins, your organization is part of the LIRC, and your organization is welcome to participate at all levels. So it's not just one or two contacts specific to a company, it's everyone within your organization, and everyone has the opportunity to participate. As we are closing in on the fourth quarter of this year, for those that choose to join at the end and pay their dues, they will have the fourth quarter free in essence. So we really encourage you to join our mission. We've done some really great work. We have enjoyed presenting these virtual webinars, and we'll continue to do those and in person when we can. So please join us. We welcome you, and we're excited that you were able to join us today. And with that, I would like to introduce Carla, who's also a steering committee member. And we have a special guest today joining her, the former IALD president, David Gatan. Carla?
Thanks, Nancy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to just give you a quick little update on LightFair. There have been some major changes to the rules for LightFair this year, as I'm sure many of you have seen. First of all attendees will get into the show floor for free. So no more searching for a code or trying to find a free pass to the show floor. All attendees will get in free. If you are exhibiting or planning to exhibit for LightFair and are interested in changing your booth size, there are no penalties for that this year. So if you have changed your booth size and you may have a credit with LightFair, that actually goes to LFI 2022. And of course, LightFair is going to follow all of the state of New York requirements. So that means all attendees to the show must have proof of vaccination, and masks are going to be required throughout the event. You can check out the LFI website for more details on how you can have your proof of vaccination handy. And we do understand that this may be controversial, but it is for the safety of all of our exhibitors and our attendees. And we also know that some of you might not be comfortable with these requirements. And if so, then we definitely look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas in 2022.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to crash this party a little bit and get to talk to everyone. I want to remind everyone here, IALD is a partner in LightFair. LightFair is owned in part by IALD as a 1/3 partner, IES, as you see on the screen there, and our trade show vendor partner, IMC. With that, historically has come not only all the reward of having very successful shows in the past and allowing IALD to continue its programs and services by getting good funding from the profit of LightFair, but also comes all the risk, right? In a year where, like last year, where the show was canceled and there were some penalties because of the show planning and potentially this year with downsized show comes risk, and hence much less income or no income from that side to the IALD. So it's important as you make your considerations relative to LightFair, not only in attendance, but hopefully in exhibiting, that you remember that money does go directly to support these associations and see them into the future. I'll say I've heard a lot of rumor out there of who's attending, who's not attending. I talked to a lot of my colleagues in the lighting design community. If they can get into the country, it sounds like they're showing up. There are a few that still have some issues on that end, but talking to folks in the US, in New York, in DC, where I'm based, and really around the country, people are excited to get together, excited to be there, excited to make these connections. This is really our time to connect with each other, to see each other in person after so long. It's not even necessarily about what is your newest product and how are you displaying it and who has the biggest and best booth. It's really that FaceTime that we've all been missing. And to that end, I would just ask my own little soapbox here. I would hope that as you start hearing these, a lot of this chatter in the industry of why isn't the show being canceled or these people aren't coming, remember part of your duty being in the LIRC is to support the ILD and help it have a successful show. So trying to pass that message forward about how excited everyone is, how LightFair is taking safety into mind, and we're looking forward to a well-attended, successful show. I'm totally available if anyone has questions or needs to pick my brain on any of that stuff. And thank you.
Thanks, David. And as we said, we look forward to seeing all of you in New York. Now I'm going to throw it over to another steering committee member, Chiara.
Hello, thank you, Carla. Today I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce IALD President Douglas Leonard. IALD, he is the director of Douglas Leonard Lighting Design, a lighting design studio founded by his father, Douglas Leonard Sr. in 1997. In 20 years practice, Douglas has led projects of diverse scale and complexity in the hospital, corporate, educational, commercial, and hotel sector in Chile and Peru, which add up to more than 2 million square meters of illuminated area. Douglas is the co-founder of the local Lighting Design Association, DIA, and part of the organizing committee of the Ibero-American Meeting of Lighting Design, IALD. He is a professional member of the International Association of Lighting Designers, and he's going to serve as president until the end of 2021. So thank you, Douglas, for being with us today, and the word to you.
Thank you, Chiara. And good morning and afternoon and evening to everyone here. Thanks to the LIRC Steering Committee and our hosts for inviting me to your meeting, to your quarterly meeting. I think this is a unique opportunity not only to catch up with you guys, but mostly to thank all the LIRC members for your continued support to the ILD, especially in this last month and years. Finally, I think this is a great chance to make a call also to the manufacturers to join the LIRC if you are not a member yet. Together, I think with the lighting design community, we are part of the same lighting environment. And I think this is the best place that I know to build and grow relationships between each other that benefit not only us, but the whole industry. I wanted to catch up and tell you about the IALD. As you know, this have been challenging times for everyone. And as you know, in 2020 and 2021, the IALD, as many other organizations, has experienced a significant reduction on their revenue. Basically explained by the cancellation of all in-person events like LightFair in 2020 and the Enlighten conferences. Fortunately, over time, the organization was able to build a reserve fund to face moments like this. And that money that came from the success of LightFair over the years, part of these results helped us to survive and navigate through the pandemic crisis. But you know that these reserves are not endless, and we were forced to make some adjustments looking for the survival and the sustainability of the organization. So the board of directors made a prioritization of the programs and activities that we used to serve our members, and based on the 2019 strategic plan that was developed. And also using other sources like the needs assessment survey that we put in place every year. And additional actions were also implemented, as a reduction in staff salary or the cancellation of all traveling. And the organization also went completely into remote mode. The staff was also reorganized to support these adjustments, which implied a 60% reduction on the number of employees, including the departure of our CEO, Marcia Turner, who did an outstanding job for over 18 years in the IALD. This has been not easy for anyone and has required a great sense of responsibility, flexibility, creativity, and resilience from staff members and volunteers. But not everything is bad. So you may also have, as you also may have experienced, the crisis derived from the pandemic has allowed us to think about the relevance of things and to distinguish between what is accessory or unnecessary and what is real and meaningful for us. And the IALD leadership thinks this is also a great opportunity for us to refresh and renew, to evolve and align our organization for the challenges of the new area, redesigning and improving our services and formats, increasing our audience and creating new revenue streams, becoming more creative and proactive to grow a sustainable organization. Our team, led by the interim CEO, Ashley Robbins, together with Kelly Ashmore as Director of Engagement, Component Relationships, and much more things, and the rest of the crew are operating great and already working on these next steps. We all feel inspired about the future and hope that you will join us with motivation and also action. And on that line, our next challenge is making LightFair at New York City a great success. And as David pointed early, the IALD is a third partner of LightFair. So the show's success is our success. We have worked hard as partners for a lot of months to redesign the brand, improve the show, to make it significant for exhibitors and attendees. And it is the first in-person event for our industry in 2 years, maybe. So it is a great opportunity to catch up with old friends, cheer up all our souls, and support the IALD. So please don't hesitate to be there if you are allowed to do it. Let's be together there. Thank you again. Have a great meeting and see you all in New York. Now I will pass it back to Ben.
Douglas, thank you for being with us today. For those of us that are headed to LightFair, We will look forward to seeing you in person in New York. One of the continuing contributions of the LIRC Steering Committee is to present content that's relevant, important, inspiring content to this platform. Today's presentation definitely checks all of those boxes. Today's guest speaker is Leela Shanker. Leela and I first collaborated when she was part of the global lighting design team at WeWork. Leela is currently a lighting designer with BR+A with Borealis, BR+A's Borealis lighting design studio in New York. Leela's presentation will provide an introduction to concepts of embodied carbon, life cycle assessment, and circular economy as they relate to lighting fixtures. Online, the need for industry standards for transparency, identify data gaps in current lighting metrics, and provide insight into progress with recent developments from the US and Europe. This is a big topic to squeeze into 45 minutes. So if you have any questions, put those questions in the Q&A. If you have any comments, put those comments in the chat. I'm going to be moderating those, and I will do my very best to make sure that we get to both of those. So we also have 2 live interactive polls that'll pop up on your screen. So for those of you that are on 12 different devices or have 12 different windows open, when you hear the cue to launch the poll, make sure you are on this screen or this device so that we can get your input. These results will certainly help drive the conversation. So let's get to the presentation. Please give a very warm virtual welcome to Leela Shanker. Leela, all yours.
Thanks so much, Ben. Let's get in here. So excited to be here. I would love to be in a room with everyone too, but in time, hey? Okay. Is this showing all right?
Yes. Yep. You're good.
Okay. Let me see if I can get rid of all this mess. So yeah, thanks again, Ben, for the warm introduction, and Douglas and the steering committee, and Kelly also for helping us get ready for this. Just really excited to share a little bit of what's going on at the moment in the industry on embodied carbon, because as an industry, we're pretty young and new to the conversation compared to other sectors of the construction industry, but it's super exciting what people are moving forward with. And I do want to say that it's really exciting to be here in this particular forum that is so international, because I love being part of the lighting global family. Myself being from Australia, of course, you know, this image makes it look like everything revolves around Australia, which maybe I think, but you know, it's really the blue marble image, or a second of them, that makes me think, as it makes many of us think, about how we can all work together to preserve it and protect it. And I think it's a great time for us to be having more conversation about how we can streamline our approach to embodied carbon and impact of luminaires in a number of different ways. So in some ways, I think this area is so new that it really requires a lot of us to be a little courageous. And I decided to rename this presentation, here, it's not, Leadership in Lighting, because I do think that in many respects, there's a few of us, and I believe many of us on this call, who really are bold enough and open enough to reconsider how we're doing things, and where it makes sense, actually evolve the way we are producing fixtures and what we're doing with them at the end of their life. And there's definitely a generation of designers and specifiers coming through who really would like to know more about the impact of our decisions. And at the moment, there is a gap in the data and the information that's existing out there. And working together, we can certainly plug that hole and start the momentum going a little faster. So with that said, wanted to give you a tiny bit more background on how I come to be in front of you all today, and thanks for sharing your time. As Ben mentioned, I'm a lighting designer with Borealis Lighting Studio in New York, which is in-house to a large engineering consulting firm, BR+A. And prior to that, I was at WeWork in their global design team here in New York with a lot of very talented people, including their sustainability team, who really did lead a lot of this interesting work that kicked off some of the lighting studies that Ben has also been part of, which is why I'm so excited to be sharing the stage with him today. As an aside, I have my own nonprofit called the Flint Collective NYC, which is all about using light to transform the experience of public space. And separate to that, very involved in the conversations happening in the lighting industry and also more broadly construction through the Green Light Alliance, as well as the Carbon Leadership Forum New York chapter and the American Institute of Architects Committee on the Environment. So the antennae are out, and I think it's for that reason that we're finding a lot of people asking more questions at the moment. And we wanted to move into the next section, which I've shared a little bit about my background, but very curious about who's actually here today and what role you have played and what degree of familiarity you might have with embodied carbon and circular economy principles. So we've got a poll. I think Ben's going to lead that. Do I have to stop sharing to do that?
Yep, I don't think you do. So just we should see the poll on the first question. Do you see that on your screen?
I don't see it on mine, but I'm not sure if that's because I'm presenting. Maybe is everyone else good?
Kelly or Kevin, can you just give me a thumbs up or let me know
We
that?
cannot see it. Did you launch it?
I have.
Oh, it's okay. We can, and now if you can see the results, we could also just announce them if you prefer.
Maybe move on to poll number 2, Ben.
I'm going to relaunch it.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That was my mistake. Sorry, people.
Yeah. So very curious to see what role in the industry everyone plays, because I've had the lucky opportunity to speak at a couple of forums this year, and it's been quite a mixed crowd, and it looks like it is again.
So we'll give everyone just a few minutes here to respond.
Yeah.
And again, this was just a, are you who you are?
Yep.
All
And,
right.
and Ben, are you seeing my screen with the poll in front of it as well, so we can recognize the live result?
Yeah, we're still on question A1, so I'm going to try to switch it to the next question. Give me a second.
So far, we've got pretty much even folks on the manufacturing, sales, marketing side and designers, so that's interesting.
Well, it's not giving me a drop-down menu anymore, Kelly.
Ben, if you have to end that poll, and then we should be able to move to the next poll.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, didn't realize I had to end. So here's question 2.
Okay, so we were just curious where everyone's located at the moment. Certainly a lot of the activity that we had to share today is coming out of Europe and North America, but very keen to know if we have more friends from other parts of the world. These breakdowns in region are basically taken from the IALD's LIRC form, how you would have submitted at the time. So I think our time zone is allowing for our North American friends to join us most easily. But
And
great
then,
to see some people from Asia.
Launching the third one.
Okay, so this is really just seeing how many of you are familiar with embodied carbon. And we can obviously dive into more or less detail based on who's here.
And then we are going to the third question. Oh, that was it. We're going to share the results.
Okay, so quite a few people not so familiar with embodied carbon, which is completely predictable based on our response at the Legication session in March earlier this year as well, where it was about 50-50 people who had heard of embodied carbon and who hadn't. So that's good to know.
And there we go.
Okay, so I think we can move on, yeah?
Okay. Let's see. Nope. Poll should be gone.
Yep. Okay, so you guys are seeing my screen all right?
You're back on, yes.
Okay, good. So I was going to say that result that we just had there about a few more people not being familiar with embodied carbon compared to those who are is pretty on par with the 44% of people who didn't know about embodied carbon before our Legication presentation, which was in March this year, as I mentioned. And I co-presented with my friend and peer, Elaine Cook from Moxie Lighting. And we had a really mixed room, just like today, of designers and manufacturer side people or product side people. So it is a new area, so let's help everyone get up to speed. But I wanted to mention that, you know, by the end of that particular session, we did another poll, as we will today, but with different questions. And we found that 94% of the room, which was, you know, over 360 people, were saying that they really would use embodied carbon information about fixtures if it was available. And even more so, that 97% of people really want for us to have some standards for data collection and life cycle assessment for luminaires. So it's all pointing to, you know, supporting us, wanting to work together on this across territories and be really efficient with our own energy in creating these standards. So today we're just going to spin through an introduction to embodied carbon, mainly recognizing that a lot of people might not be familiar with those terms. And then the second section, I will be sharing a little bit more of what's happening around the industry, and that kind of taps into the presentation that I gave recently with Gabe Arnold and Kate Hickox from the Pacific Northwest National Lab. And that was part of an IES webinar, the Meet the Moment series, which was the lighting and sustainability contribution that we made. And then I think what came out of those two sessions this year was that there were a lot of people in the Q&A, particularly on the manufacturing side, asking for some direction or guidance of where to start. What can we do? You know, there's an interest, it's a compelling area. There is a call to action, but there is sometimes some confusion about where to begin. And so we're going to try and put forward some proposals for easy things that may not cost very much, all the way to formal verification. And then I'm very excited to have a little time with Ben to just have an in conversation section where we can talk about some of our actual real life experiences in coming into this field and trying to start some of this data flow, if you like. And then of course, we'll turn it over for broader questions to everyone here. So spinning through, we can jump straight into the idea of what is the life cycle of a luminaire. And you may have heard these terms cradle to cradle, cradle to grave, cradle to gate, but they're all referring to the duration of the lifespan of a luminaire, not just when it's used and, you know, doing what it was designed to do, but during the production of the fixture, and also at the end of its life, what happens to it in terms of disposal or recycling. And there's a number of metrics that we would all be familiar with that really look at potential metrics, if you like, for the duration of the lifespan of a fixture like L70. You know, do we look at the loss of output from its original state? that's all tied to the usage phase only. Similarly, if you wanted to look at warranty periods, that's a very underestimated length of the life or potential life of a luminaire. And then capital work cycles can also be a very short kind of glimpse of the full impact of a luminaire. And so if we consider that there are other ways to think about the environmental impact and community impact of our fixtures, we start to trace back to the phase where we get the resources out of the ground and actually transport them to manufacturing facilities and process those materials to a point where they're ready for use. And then, yes, consider usage phase, but then after that, think about the energy that's actually associated with and the material waste associated with the end life of a product. But what you may pick up from this diagram, which I created earlier this year for designing lighting, is that it matters because depending on where we as an industry want to set the goalposts, we'll have very different impacts on the considered value or positive or negative impact of a particular fixture over another. So if we take into account cradle to cradle, we would be including the resource extraction from the ground all the way through to potential recycling, whereas cradle to grave and cradle to gate are shorter analyses. So to gate means just as far as the product goes to leave the manufacturing facility, whereas cradle to grave would include some degree of disposal, but maybe not recycling. And all this to say that we don't necessarily have to take a position as to which is the most useful, but we do need to be able to compare, and it would be better if we all agreed on which cycles we think are most relevant and which stages we're going to account for in the metrics. So moving on to the impact of a luminaire over the course of its life cycle, there's two main dimensions that we can look at. It's the materials impact and the energy impact. And when we look at materials, that starts to introduce this idea of the circular economy, and the overall aim here is to reduce waste. So comparing the traditional linear economy, where resources come out of the ground and they head on a one-way ticket through manufacture and distribution and use and end up back in landfill. With the circular economy, we're really trying to think about principles that allow us to recapture some of the materials and components in a luminaire and extend the life of a luminaire or give it a second life, or at least reclaim some of the parts so there's less ending up as waste. And then on the other side, the energy side, the big talk is about embodied carbon. And as an industry, we have obviously focused on the increased efficiency, operational efficiency of LED technology, which is amazing and helpful. And all our codes and targets in this sphere really tend to focus on building consumption, energy consumption. So what keeps the lights on? But another part of the story is the energy and the emissions associated with all of the processes to convert raw materials into a product and move it around the world, and then install it, maintain it, and remove it from wherever the site where it was installed was. And ultimately what we want to do is reduce our carbon footprint in both of these sectors. So this is where there are a lot of designers, specifiers, manufacturers starting to be open and concerned about reducing the overall picture of our luminaire impact. So quickly dropping in some of the terms that we're going to hear over the next little section. Embodied carbon itself is really about focusing on the carbon emissions associated with the non-operational side of a fixture's impact. But then you've got all these other terms that relate more to the structure of analysing and reporting impact. We've touched on the circular economy being the bigger picture economic system that we're thinking about. Life cycle assessment is an actual kind of methodology. Product category ruling is an industry agreed set of rules to allow a particular kind of approach to life cycle assessment. And then environmental product declarations are the actual report that is created as a result of applying the PCR through life cycle assessment. So just spinning through a little bit more of the detail here, the life cycle assessment basically looks at 4 key stages of the life of a luminaire. So product stage is what we've been talking about so far, where we actually create the physical product. Construction process is more about getting the materials and the product and the components shipped between particular sites and then to the final destination where it's installed. Use stage is where we've traditionally, as an industry, focused all our energy and strategy, if you like, in terms of reducing carbon footprint. But then end life is a really interesting area now, where there are new business models opening up and new ideas for design of products that allow for a different approach to deconstruction and waste and disposal and recovery of materials. So just to demonstrate the product category ruling, an easy way to think about it is that it's basically a recipe or a formula. So if you think about a martini, you know, a martini is not a martini, is not a martini. You have certain components, but the method of preparing it and what you may include can differ. You know, is there an olive? Is it shaken? Is it stirred? And if we translate that to the luminaire life cycle assessment, we need rules because we need to make certain assumptions as we're going through the assessment of impact. And I'm pointing to one particular existing standard that exists that came out of Europe, the PepsiCo Passport product specific ruling for luminaires. Came out in 2018, and good news is that for North America, UL just a few weeks ago in August have formally acknowledged that this PSR can be applied to North American analysis for environmental product declarations too. So you end up then following this methodology with specific rules that everyone agrees, so that we can actually have a sensible way to compare different luminaires, and you'll get a very specific report that gives you a series of metrics about greenhouse gas emissions. And this is an example of one of the recently released environmental product declarations from WEF. They released a whole series early this year in January, and I believe they're going through a whole nother set as we speak. But this was an updated set from a series that were published first in 2012. So this is not necessarily a new thing for everybody. Some manufacturers have really taken the lead, and the information is there when specifiers ask for it. But in the greater sense, there's a lot more manufacturers who haven't quite started yet, and that's fine. We can do this together, and it will be better if we do it in a coordinated way. So just to give you a better sense of the data that you're going to get out of one of these reports, these greenhouse gas emissions are related to different aspects of environmental impact, whether that's on the ozone layer or quality of breathing air or ecosystems, or the degree to which they involve using non-renewable energy resources. But the global warming potential, or GWP, is what we really focus on the most. So I think it's a good time to take a breather from the technical and start to have a look at where we're at. And some of you may already be members of the Green Light Alliance, but this was an industry collaboration platform that kicked off early this year. And there's a lot of people involved in this conversation, and it's very exciting to be part of it. I'm a contributing member, and there's a lot of other designers, manufacturers, compliance schemes, education, standards bodies, and associations who are feeding into this conversation. And the vision is to light up the world without depleting its resources. So it's a group of industry professionals in lighting specifically who want to consider circular economy principles and progress our ability to actually have some consistent standards. And the idea is that it's a knowledge share platform. It can also serve for advocacy, and again, just make sure that we are aware of all of the amazing work that's being done across the world so that we're not duplicating efforts or even ending up with conflicting standards. So to take you through a few developments over the last couple of years that have led to where we're at with the Lighting Industry Environmental Product Declaration, there was, from my perspective, these are the key things that have influenced where I've got to with things. In 2019, while I was still at WeWork, there was a study that was conducted with the Carbon Leadership Forum, which was looking at a North American WeWork space to identify the embodied carbon impacts of different building materials. And it identified that LED fixtures are in fact a high impact item. Feeding off that, the lighting team at WeWork actually started to look into a preliminary data collection exercise to analyze 5 of our key standard fixtures. And that's where Ben and I started to talk about what LumenWorks could pull together on a data side for one of their linear fixtures. And as a result of that, we identified a number of holes. And it was very clear that we need more expert advice, and also in any case would want to take this to the industry so that it's not a sort of proprietary set of data. And at this point, we do have a non-profit research group, the Athena Sustainable Materials Institute, who have scope to work with the lighting industry to complete a 5-product or more analysis. And more recently, so that was earlier this year, just in the last few weeks, as I mentioned earlier, UL have now recognised formally that we do have a product category ruling for North American EPDs that we can follow, which just means it streamlines this process of kicking off the industry EPD, because we have some rules that we can all agree to accept for the life cycle assessment. And so the idea would be, as a result of today's conversation and many others happening around the industry, that we would have a leadership group who are prepared to be part of a working group to contribute data from their particular manufacturers' products, and basically share in a de-identified way data so that we can actually have a number of industry average figures, if you like, for certain products. So we would really love for people who are interested in this or even curious and want to know more to contact us after. So I think I can skip through some of these a little more quickly, but if you would like more information about the WeWork Carbon Leadership Forum study, we can certainly share that. It's publicly available online, but just showing you quickly that the study of the different stages of life cycle showed that it's the production phase of luminaires that has the highest impact, as it does for most of these different building materials, if you like. And it may surprise you to find that interior lighting is up there with HVAC and, aluminium framed storefronts. One of the big things that accounts for the impact is the use of metal, because that obviously needs a lot of processing and accounts for a very large amount of weight in the product. So what we found was that in terms of MEP scope, LED fixtures are actually the second highest impact item, second to HVAC. And at the same time, we don't have all of the data that we would like to have that other more established industries in the construction sector have. To that end, I know that CIBSE, the British Engineering Society, have created TM65 as a call out to MEP suppliers to share more data, and we'll come back to that. So the next step was that we had 5 different luminaires that we were delving into in a deeper fashion in 2020 to do a preliminary study, and we'll share some of the data gaps that we identified. But primarily where we go now is we'd really like to agree as an industry which types of luminaires we think would be most relevant and most important to retrieve data from, so we don't compare completely different kinds of fixtures to each other. We want to also have an agreed methodology, so a standard process of the assumptions that you take when you do this analysis, as well as functional units or base unit. In this case, with the European PSR, we actually have settled on 35,000 hours and a 1,000 lumen output fixture. And then there's also just pieces of data that we still need to collect. For example, energy data from different facilities and different parts of the world. It's quite variable, and certain materials included in the making of luminaires. So you'll see here that as we decide to step forward in pursuing an industry EPD, we aren't alone in this process. It's been done by a lot of different sectors. These are just a few of the councils that Athena Sustainable Materials Institute has worked with. So you can see there the Wood Council, cement, gypsum, single ply roofing. It's a process that we can work through together, and we would love more people to be helping with this. So Athena has a very good reputation. They've been doing it for over 20 years and completed over 300 LCA studies. So they've got a lot of experience behind them and have been very generous in figuring this out with other industries. So I think we'd be in good hands. What has been proposed as a draft is to evaluate 5 different luminaire categories with a minimum of 3 brands per product. So we'd be starting with a core of maybe 12 to 15 manufacturers, and it would be great to have some component manufacturers too. But this is something that can be massaged as we go along and we find out who's really interested in participating. There is interest also from potentially, it's on the radar of the Department of Energy here and a few other research groups. And I think it would be really good to be working alongside these bodies as well. So now that we have the rules set, we probably don't have as much of a problem in the methodology for the data gaps. It's just a matter of now deciding how many and which luminaires we want to focus on and filling in the generic data that we can when we have manufacturers asking for that specifically from their product teams and partner facilities. And if you're wondering, who cares? Is anyone caring? There's definite market demand for this data, and a few things that are happening are proving that. So there's a lot of grassroots action. For example, the lighting advocacy letter, which launched last month here in the US, and anyone is welcome to sign it. But it was started and is hosted on the Mindful Materials website, and that is kind of a dear manufacturer letter saying that we want to support and show that we do want to know more about what goes into our fixtures and what impact they're having. At the same time, there are projects being made that are created with just secondary market fixtures, like Push, which was a temporary installation for a skate park in Sweden. It's one of the case studies that's featured on the Greenlight Alliance website if you'd like to know more. And at the same time, we have this search problem of finding who's actually got EPDs and can share this kind of information. Where do we go to find these suppliers who have actually invested in curating the information for us? Well, one place is obviously Mindful Materials, but you may have heard of Arup's Luminaire Broker, which is another new digital platform, which has just recently introduced the ability for you to look for a number of dimensions in terms of circular economy principles, and also whether a product has an EPD attached. And I've definitely had some interesting conversations with certain manufacturers about how we can even include EPDs perhaps in the catalogue number or other ways for specifiers to find those right now rare fixtures. At the same time, there's incentives for people to actually seek out products with EPDs. So there's green building incentives, both, you know, certainly here in North America and Europe. Would love to know more about other regions and codes that are relevant. But we're also seeing RFPs include the need for or provide incentive for people to include products with EPDs. A lot of government work is requesting it. It's included in specs, and certain architects and engineers are actually requesting it as well. So it's certainly on the move and it's not going away. So what can we do? Where should we start? I think sometimes it can feel daunting because it's a new area, but in the first instance, it's something that doesn't have to include any sort of financial outlay. So finding someone within your team who's actually excited about this or would consider it you know, an interesting exercise to be championing the research or having, you know, the opportunity to actually investigate further and understand the product from this perspective. And I think Ben probably has some comments to this, which we'll get to. But the second thing, which also does not involve any kind of outlay, is starting to participate in the dialogue that's happening in the industry. So the Green Light Alliance, Carbon Leadership Forum, I'm sure there's a number of other groups that all exist, including the IES Sustainability Committee. There are ways to actually work together to share some of the methods that we're using to approach the data collection and analysis. And it doesn't have to be something we figure out on our own. Then there's a lot of design considerations, and I'm going to touch on those, where we can, without actually going down any formal verification process, we can actually start to look at how design of our products can evolve to have lower impact. And then starting to kick off internally an analysis of supply chain, which involves data collection and identifying the facilities that you might be asking for information from in time, all the way up to formally having third-party verified product EPDs or participating in the industry EPD pilot. So a couple of more specific examples of supply chain analysis, you know, actually looking at and being able to publish with existing label frameworks or green incentive frameworks. We can point to Declare as one example of material transparency. There are other versions of digital product passports and product labels that might end up being more like a physical barcode that travels with the product. You can identify where all your components are being made and try and rework things so that you're working with local suppliers more so, or sourcing materials from sustainably sourced sites. And then at the other end of the life cycle, there's interesting moves for secondary markets, so secondhand luminaires or reuse of luminaires. And there's also interesting developments with repurposing of old technology housing with new technology. So for example, this particular example from Stone Lighting was used in a museum exhibition setting. So they were actually using the housing for an MR7 and updating it with LED technology. There's also the development of new business models such as lighting as a service. So extending what might be just a 5-year warranty to a 20-year duty of care, where in this case, this image is from Stone, but they will actually come to site where the fixtures are installed, and there's an obligation or a commitment to actually upgrade certain parts. And that is really quite a different move from where we either couldn't have them repaired or replaced, or where to do so would involve taking the fixture out of the site. Then if we look at the design of the fixture itself, if we're not thinking about verification, but we're just wanting to look at components and how we actually plan ahead for the end of life phases of a fixture. At the beginning of the life cycle, we're seeing alternate methods and materials being used. For example, if we were to move to using more recycled aluminium, we would have quite a significant impact because there's so much more energy required to process primary aluminium alloy rather than using recycled. There's fixtures being designed with more wood from sustainably sourced sites and bamboo. There's also printing, 3D printing, which you can do on site to again avoid the transportation emissions. And then thinking about the replaceability, repairability of fixtures and ensuring that these fixtures have a longer life, and also using fewer materials potentially, or considering the processes involved, maybe taking out a few of the steps, which can also be a cost saving. And then designing for disassembly is a really interesting area where people are thinking upfront about how to deconstruct a fixture at the end of its life. This is a drawing from Finelight, clearly showing how each of the parts are going to be recyclable and making it quite easy to extract those. So the more we can design for the idea of needing to extract recyclable components, the more efficient that process is at the end of the life of the luminaire. And then, of course, all of these many ways to tap into the knowledge that is growing between all different manufacturers and different designers as well about what we can do to improve the data collection that we have that relates to lighting fixtures, sharing that publicly through different labels and declarations, so that several frameworks that have developed that are specific to lighting, like Lighting for Good, but then also ones that we know much more that have been around for some time, LEED, the Living Product Challenge, Cradle to Cradle, we should investigate. And then if we don't want to do a formal EPD or start with that, there's certainly frameworks that you can start to follow that are available for free online to kick off, to give you a sense, a picture of what data you're going to be looking for. And I'm happy to share links to these, but TM65 was a call out for MEP items and to try and get more embodied carbon data growing effectively. And there's a very good survey of all of the bits of data that you're going to need, which gets you actually 90% of the way to what you would need for a formal EPD. And TM66 is a list of 66 questions that manufacturers can go through that look at the circular economy principles that are relevant to their production. And it specifies to have a conversation with manufacturers to understand the same. And of course, at the very formal end of this spectrum is having a third-party verified document, which I know a number of us are very keen to see, and a number of manufacturers are committing to pursue. And that's where I think there's a lot of discussion that we need to have to make sure that it doesn't become a perceived hurdle, I suppose, or a perceived disruption. So I've mentioned how you can find TM65 if you'd like to have a look at the data that might be required, but also we would have an introductory session for anyone curious about EPDs where we can go over this in more detail too. So yeah, with that, enough of me talking on my own. Would love to bring Ben into this conversation, and we have some aspects that we want to touch on about, is there really a market demand out there? How do we go about starting? Potential cost conversation, and also how we work together. Maybe I can stop sharing my screen, and but please do use our emails to continue this conversation, and let's jump into the chat. Ben.
Thank you, Leela. Thank you so much for that introduction. I think the polls showed that many of us are familiar, but I think you certainly have pointed out many things that we all need to be thinking about and trying to be a part of. So I think one of the very first things that we worked on when you were at WeWork was that very first request for, I think would be an EDP. And that was my initial introduction to it. And from then, it is certainly, obviously has grown. The market demand, I think one of the key things that you shared, is it really real? Are people actually asking for this? And I can absolutely attest that people are asking. Just a few weeks ago, I have started almost on a weekly basis, starting to get lighting designers and architects asking for EDPs. One of the things that was a challenge for us at LumenWorks very early on, when we tried to do this for LumenWorks, was where to actually find that information. So I think our experience was interesting because it took us weeks, I think. And going through that, I think as we start to see more requests and more designers, be it lighting designers, architects, or engineers, I think us as manufacturers absolutely have to be ready for that movement. And if we're not already involved, very quickly get involved. So from a real standpoint, from Ben Cantu from LumenWorks, I can tell you, yes, this is a real movement. And I think we really need to do all we can to get in there and try to provide as much information as possible. So
yeah, we were really very excited at how quickly you were able to move initially, to have buy-in from the top that this was something that LumenWorks wanted to back and investigate. But I very much appreciate how every company is different, and different manufacturers we were working with had immediately a point person to, it's not actually that complicated. The data we're after is the materials, the raw materials that go into a product, the relative weight of that material, and then the manufacturing processes associated with it. So it might be powder coating, spitting, whatever it is. And I think it's a good point you make, that finding the right first person to kind of take this on could be different in each case. So it might sit within the product design team or the engineering team or the marketing or the sales. So once you find that person, I think it can move faster.
Yeah, and I think that was a great, again, a great example with LumenWorks, in that I was struggling. I initially sent it to our marketing team, and our marketing team was like, I don't know what to do this. What's an EDP? And then I sent it to my production manager, and my production manager was like, I don't know what this is. So it just kept bouncing around. And I finally, one of our optical engineers is huge into recycling, and she actually initiated a major recycling program at our facility. And something just clicked, and I was like, you know what? That might be the person to actually, be the advocate and be the pioneering person for our company that would come in and say, yes, I'm passionate about this, and this is something that I would like our company to be a part of. So we all know the LIRC is made up of, very diverse sizes and ranges of companies. And I think finding that person and ultimately that person sort of being the champion within a company is really a great way to start, because it is obviously an investment. It's an investment in time. It's an investment in R&D. It's compliance. So we really need, if there are ways to cross over from marketing or cross over from production, where that information may already be there, I think, again, a key way to get involved early and be somewhat of a pioneer in this movement.
Have you been, I'm just curious also, in terms of it having been for LumenWorks anyway, it took a little time to find where this work would sit. Does it remain something that's considered more a marketing project or an R&D project or a compliance project? Because I know that that speaks to a lot of different budgets as well.
Yeah, no, and I think it crosses over to all of those. Most companies, I would think, are going to see this as a marketing opportunity. To put this on their spec sheets or to include EDPs or include whatever information they can in, whether it's just life cycle assessment or embodied carbon. I think that's an opportunity because, as we know, the design community is very aggressive in these types of movements. So we definitely want to be able to respond. For us, specifically for my team, I think it was a collective effort of finding a lot of the information that was already readily available and just collecting it and putting it together in a format that was obviously that was going to be responsive to what you, when you were at Rework, were asking us for. So I think we, again, LIRC members always sort of at the forefront of the movements, always involved, always wanting to be supportive of the industry and the designers. I think this is a great opportunity for LIRC members to get in there and say, yes, how do we do this? And if there isn't exact guidelines and exact formats for it, maybe we become the pilot group, as you've shared, to put that together. So, it might be a great opportunity for a small company, and I say small just in size of volume and sales, to be a part of it and to share how they've collected the information. And then a medium-sized company. And then, we can go to the conglomerates and say, hey guys, you got a ton of money to spend, and how would you do this? And would you be willing to share that information, again, as a pilot program for anyone else that's interested and being a part of that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting from some of the conversations I've been having over the last year that it's often not the size of the company that determines if people are really wanting to pursue this. It's often the smaller companies and the decorative companies right now who just have people inside who are really passionate, or the founders are really passionate, and that's exciting. And I think we should embrace that and move with everyone who has the right energy towards it. And I think it would be good too, as the word keeps propagating, to have some other big players involved as well.
Yeah, and again, I think this is a great platform for manufacturers, designers, anybody else in the other disciplines. They're obviously interested in, again, being relevant and being current. We all jumped on the LEED bandwagon. We all jumped on the WELL bandwagon. Living Building Challenge is a little more difficult. Anybody that's providing those declarations knows that to provide the information for LBC is very challenging. And I think it might be interesting to see if the data and information from some of those compliance programs can actually carry over. So again, finding the right person and finding that champion who is, for other companies, just step up and say, yes, we need to be a part of this for whatever reason. Whether it's their personal passion or the marketing team thinks that it's going to be a great marketing spin. I think it needs to be pushed from all angles, because it is obviously a very critical and a very important point that we need to be making. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Do you want to do the poll? Just
yeah, I'd love that.
Okay, let's. I'm going to try to do this a little more efficiently than I did last time. So this is the second poll. Let's see. Can you guys see that on the screen?
I can't yet, but.
Okay. Maybe I will either Kelly or Kevin, if you guys are available to actually do the poll. The next.
It's there now.
I got it. I'll take over, Ben.
Yeah, if you'll take over, that way I don't stumble with it. So, and then I'll jump into the Q&A right after the poll.
So yes, this first question, we were just curious, what the response is in terms of whether people believe it would be helpful to have more research pursued on this front. And it's a resounding yes, so that's good. We agree. I think it's an area that we should be, coming to understand in the same way that other industries like the concrete industry have really got so much further along and even have government subsidies now for suppliers to pursue EPDs. At some point, maybe we could get there. And I'm very curious too, given we have people from around the world, whether different governments or industry bodies are approaching this in a more favorable way. So the second question was basically, and Ben, I'm not sure if you can speak to this too, but we were curious if we are seeking to pursue this as a group, a pioneering group of manufacturers and specifiers, for example, the LIRC, if it would be helpful or whether you believe that it should be something that is also subsidized and or supported by government bodies and industry bodies.
Again, I think the more visibility and the more input there is, again, most manufacturers would probably jump in, knowing that there's already support from other industry bodies. If there's government support, we know that sometimes that will slow the process. You know how slow the government can be, but if there is already action and we are able to sort of ride in on that coattail, I would absolutely say that I think a lot of manufacturers would be willing to do that.
And I can say that it's been very encouraging that PNNL and the DOE have this as an area that they are looking at. And for anyone who's curious, in January next year, the annual research and development workshop that the DOE hosts for lighting, where they actually share a lot of the most current lighting research, should be addressing some of this. And that would be a great forum for all of us who care about it to participate and make it clear that we want more support here, more research, and celebrate what they're going to do. And then the third question, we're just recognizing, as was also mentioned earlier in this call before we started this presentation, it has been a difficult year and the market has been different. And, a lot of manufacturers have been experiencing the economic impact of the pandemic. And we recognize that there's questions always raised about what's the investment that's associated with getting this system started. And, we were very interested to hear where people would ideally like for this investment to sit. Is it in the range of an annual membership for the LIRC, or is it in the range of other compliance schemes, or is it in the range of, if we think about the R&D budget or the marketing budget for a new product, which is well over 20,000 most of the time compared to other, regulatory reports that you have to produce. Very keen to see what people are thinking here.
Yeah, and I'm going to chime in here because I know that as LIRC members, we get asked for a lot of money. And that's part of the game. We have to support the industry. And I think it'll go back to the size of company and passion of that company.
Yeah.
There are some very visible companies who are, leading movements and leading, responding to the community and being out there and saying, yes, we'll do whatever it's going to take to make sure that lighting designers get the information that they need and have the information that is readily available. Our last presentation, spec sheets have so much information on them, but if this is something that we can, pass on to all sizes of companies, whether the investment is low, or I should say minimal, or extensive. Again, I think it reflects on the companies, and those are definitely things that we obviously have very diverse companies, and I think we just need to make it available to as many as possible.
Well, thanks for all of those comments and the feedback. I think probably the range that we may have expected to see. It's something I think that we need to keep pursuing as things become clearer. So
excellent. So a couple of questions. Oh, do we have? No, that's the poll, I believe. That's everything on the poll. There was 3 questions on the second poll. So we will go to some questions that are in the Q&A. We touched on it, but and I'm gonna leave these anonymous so I don't call anybody out. What do you think of SLL TM66 and the associated circular economy assessment method? So you did touch on it a little bit, but I think this is very much a more directed question at you as to what are your thoughts about it?
well, it's very new and I can't claim to be an expert. I did have a little bit of an introduction, you know, to what was to come from Bob Bohannon and Kristen, but I think it's a good thing that we're having, given the framework to have conversations, because I think a lot of people aren't sure where to start and what they should be doing. So it provides a series of questions, and then I'm not sure how familiar everyone is, but you end up with a rating, a star rating, if you like, out of 4 for performance on a number of different dimensions. The fact that it's at least something we can all respond to, and you know, it is kind of in a beta phase where we're going to see how the data comes in. I think I'm super interested to see the uptake and also the data that comes of it, and have a lot of respect for the fact that it's got a lot of detail in there. It's not directed so much at the embodied carbon side of things, but these are all really important complementary conversations to be having, and that's why they both sit within the Green Light Alliance at the moment.
So there's a second part to that question, is do you think that TM66 and CEAM is going to be adopted in the US market?
Well, I guess I don't feel that I can respond for everybody, but I do I do really want, I can only express my personal opinion, of course, and that is that these are global issues, and we're an amazingly, I think, supportive global community as an industry. And as much as possible, it would be great to see all of this progress happening as, you know, as a global community. And with the industry EPD work, for example, we would like for there to be participation and application of that research and data across geographic boundaries. Having said that, recognize that everywhere has more local codes or energy, you know, different national grids for energy data and so forth, that needs to be taken into account. But I think if we all have visibility, at least, of the work that's being done and the kind of metrics and the kind of priorities, if you like, product priorities, design priorities, then that's going to help drive progress in every territory. So I have, for example, asked whether the North American data is welcome and encouraged for the TM66 and TM65 call outs, if you like. And it is a yes. It is yes to North American products being part of the growth of that data pool. And also, you know, given that TM65 is directed at MEP items, I wasn't sure if lighting was, you know, supposed to feature in there, but it was again a yes. So I think it's just a matter of finding how much resources each of us has as well to contribute and deciding where we want to spend our time the most.
So yeah, no, and again, we know that EDP and CEAMs are going to turn up in the UK and in the EU eco design regulations at the next revision form for 2023 and 2024. Do we need do we not need regulation to force the manufacturers to provide this information? I mean, is that it? I don't know that we can force manufacturers to provide any information, but we can certainly be very, very aggressive to go in and say, yes, you need to include this information, or we just won't specify it. So do you think that there's that much strength in it?
Yeah, I think the debate about best practice as a voluntary scheme within the industry versus legislation or regulation is a conversation I've been having with a few different people. And I think the hope is that you could have an effective scheme that isn't necessarily, that can be driven by the industry.
Yeah.
And it would be great if we're all on board, but of course, we'll see, there'll probably be just certain players who want to be leaders in this area. As I understood, it was possible that it might be introduced as a test on a more voluntary basis and then be rolled out to be legislation. But perhaps other people on this call also have more background and more to share on that point.
Yeah. So I know I'm watching our time and we're getting very close to the end here. So this came through as on the chat, but I want to share it. It says, I'm fairly certain there is a strong correlation between many aspects of sustainable luminaire design and lower cost / improved service levels for a manufacturer. This may be an approach to pursue to garner stronger manufacturer engagement. And I'm also fairly certain that manufacturers that have been pursuing cost value engineering and supply chain service improvements have achieved significant sustainability improvements, even if this was not the primary driver. So again, I think it sort of hits home that the manufacturers that want to be a part of this will definitely step up. You know, I think we're at the beginning of what is going to be a very critical movement. And if there are, you know, we obviously want to collect as many people and include as many people that want to be a part of this to make that movement stronger. So any final words, Leela?
Well, I'd echo everything you just said, Ben, and also thanks, Scott, for including that point, because I know that I have anecdotes from WEF and other people who have been looking into very detailed analysis and been able to find cost savings because they've removed certain processes like certain powder coating, or I think that there definitely are kickbacks, even if you didn't, you know, set out to do this as a cost-saving exercise, and just being more aware. The whole point is we want to be aware of the data and aware of our processes so we can make better decisions. And I think that goes as much for the product side of our industry as the design side. So just very excited to make sure there's resonance and that we all work together. And if there's more that anyone can think of for designers to do to support you in your decisions as manufacturers to investigate and invest in this data collection process and sharing of information, let us know.
Yeah, and there was one final question as to how to get involved. So anyone that's interested, I think you saw one of the previous slides where both our Leela's contact information and my contact information is available. So anyone that participated, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I think this is absolutely a critical movement that we need to be a part of. And Leela, I was very, very fortunate to be contacted by Leela and to basically include me in this. So Leela, we thank you for the information. We thank you for your passion, and we thank you for continuing to support the IALD and the LIRC members. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this platform and this time together. And of course, as always, Ben, your amazing energy.
Thank you. I will kick it over to Alexis, who will finish out the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Leela. What a wonderful discussion. And it is critical. And the more aware we can be as a community to be proactive is really the direction we have to take. So thank you. Thank you for your passion and a great conversation, and look forward to positive follow-ups as we move along. Thank you. And for those of you on the call, thank you for joining us today. And we will be having the Q4 meeting at Light Fair, and I believe the details will be going out for that probably sometime next week. We look forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully. So on behalf of Alexis and the entire steering committee, thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.